Hello and welcome to another episode of Love Selling, Hate Sales. Today I am joined by Michael Kelly, who is the co-founder of Rhythm AI. Mike, sorry. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, Josh. I really do appreciate it. Very excited to talk with you and be here.
I don't mean to treat you like your mom and call you Michael. You're not in trouble, trust me. We're just going to talk about sales, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, my mom hasn't called me Michael since about the sixth grade. I pitched a fit and said, I am Mike.
Oh, you're Mike. Okay.
That was I tried to be very independent and buck the system at a very young age.
All right. You want to be independent and buck the system, yet I hear you're a system and process guy when it comes to sales.
Well, that is true. Yes. There is a way to do things and a way not to do things. What I meant was just, I guess, as my wife likes to say, I don't like being specifically told what to do unless it's one of the ideas that I come up with. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I am a big system and process guy, things that you can repeat. And in sales, I think they're extremely important, being able to find a way to excel and then replicate that over and over and over and over again.
Well, I think that's super interesting, especially looking at your background, right? It looks like you have a deep medical pharma sales background. I did a brief stint in that area myself, so I have all sorts of thoughts about pharma sales, and we can get into that a little bit. But one of the things I noticed when I was in that business is there wasn't really a lot of system and process, right? What they teach you when you go out into the field is how you basically interrupt doctors and become a talking brochure. Like, that's my takeaway. And obviously I have a lot of bias in that, but how did you kind of fall into, well, listen, system and process is the thing that I need to focus on? Is it because it was lacking in what you were getting out of your career? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, and before I do, I want to agree with what you're saying. So my father was in pharmaceutical sales for 30 years with Roche.
Oh, wow.
And he told me not to get into pharmaceutical sales. And so I didn't start out in pharmaceutical sales. I went to enterprise and worked there, and that was kind of the copier sales, the getting into sales, as recruiters say. And I kind of fell backwards into pharmaceutical sales. A lot of it had to do with the money, but my dad would talk about the training that he went through, and it was like the military. My dad was a military, a vet in the Army, and he said he would literally fly out to San Francisco at the time and literally get off the plane. They take your bags. You go to a ballroom where they have tables set up and chairs, and you get tested on all the product. And so they tell you when you're at home, you have to learn the product. You have to learn the pharmacokinetics. You have to learn how it deals with the body. You have to learn all that there. And then what they do is, if you pass the test, then they teach how do you communicate this to a physician? How do you sell to a physician? They'd go over psychology. They'd go over body language, tone, etc. When I came along, my dad left the industry. He retired in the late 90s. And so I started in 2008. Okay. So it really wasn't that different of a time. And the focus of the training that I had, and as I went through up until I left the industry in 2020, the training got less and less and less and less, and it was more microwaved. When I started in 2008, it was, a week, and it was a lot. It was very heavy on the science, which you need to have. If you're going to talk to a physician, you have to be able to talk their language and intrigue them. But we are not doctors. We did not go to medical school. And so just simply focusing on that, what's going to happen is there's going to be a conversation, and then all of a sudden you don't know what to say next because you didn't go through it. You didn't practice. As we mentioned before the conversation, the 10,000 hours with Malcolm Gladwell.
That's right.
You don't have the reps. And so you have to, the way my father's industry did it back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was you learn all the material before you get here, and we're going to get you through the reps. Okay. Whereas I think now it's, you get here, we'll tell you what to say, and then we'll go through the reps of how you say it. And I love how you eloquently put it on one of your previous episodes, that you kind of get there and you go through role plays, and it's two types of people. It's the ones that are just trying to be jerks, or it's the ones that just agree with you and they just give you softballs.
Yep, that's about it.
And that doesn't prepare you for the field. And so by the time it ended, the last 3 medical and pharmaceutical companies that I worked for, I did not go to their corporate office for training.
Okay. How did
It was all done with a PowerPoint or something that was online.
Oh, wow.
No human interaction. I didn't go to the corporate office and meet people, because when I was hired, it was in between training classes, as they would say. And so it was just kind of your resume looks great. You've got a lot of experience. Go out in the field and sell. And I went from selling pharmaceuticals to post-procedure kits in plastic surgery offices to selling radiation machines to dermatologists.
Those couldn't be any more different.
They're all about the skin. However,
Sure.
exactly, Josh,
Yeah.
they are not the same. And yet it was just go out, talk to, you know how to talk to people, right? Well, yeah, I know how to talk to people,
Of course
but
I do.
you know, we're going from selling pharmaceuticals where doctors don't pull any money out of their wallet to post-procedure kits. Well, they'll pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to then $500,000 machines.
It's a big difference.
It's a big difference. And so I had been thinking about, going back to your previous question, the processes and systems. I realized very quick that when I was at Enterprise, they have all the systems and process for you.
Right.
You just follow.
What they're known for.
They're known for it. It's an MBA crash course. It's excellent training. And if anybody's listening right now, and if you're in sales, and go to a company that has great training. Go to the copier sales, the payroll sales, the enterprises of the world, because they will set you up for life. A lot of the training I still lean on. And so what I realized very quickly was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to do anything for me. I mean, there was nothing in place. And every territory I took over, for the most part, was failing. And it wasn't living up to potential. So it wasn't like I was walking into a territory where it was just plug and play. But that's how it was presented to me, was just a plug and play. And I think that's the fallacy of the modern training systems. It's just plug and play. We've got a list of talking points, and these people are talented and they're smart. And there's an assumption that previous companies trained them.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. And so I do think that there is something severely lacking in the training sphere.
Yeah. And I think, there's different types of folks, especially in the sales profession, right? And one of the most common threads in this show is nobody went to school for sales.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's true.
Right. So everyone fell into it one way or another, right? Your dad was a career pharma rep. You kind of had that in your blood. You were able to get into it and get your feet wet, and that's fine. You're obviously personable. You can get out there and you can talk. But I think that's a lot of a stereotype of salespeople. Not all salespeople are that way. Mm-mm. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different things to sell. Right? You don't have to, and they don't all require the outgoing personality, this and that. Like if you're selling engineering to engineers, chances are you are a process-driven person, right? And I've seen those people make the shift into like B2B SaaS and be really freaking successful because they're so process-driven that they just get dialed in really quickly. So I'm curious for people like me that aren't necessarily process and systems driven, how do you help them see the value? How do you help them say, listen, you're not going to go get this. Like you just said, you're not going to go get this from your employer, but it's an absolute necessity to be successful in sales in the long term. How do you try to get people on that train?
That's a good question. How am I doing it? So I, as we spoke before, and we met through a sales podcasting community. Yeah. I've got a podcast where I just try to break it down. I'm trying to supplement that with free resources online. Right. As an entrepreneur, it's a lot of time to do that, and so I'm trying to help people. I kind of joke. One of my former managers said, if you've seen the movie with Russell Crowe, A Beautiful Mind, he said, God, I just wonder what is going on inside that head of yours. Because I'm a big thinker, a macro thinker, and I wasn't necessarily always like this. My dad was a very heads down, do your job, look at the tasks in front of you. Right. And that's how I, at Enterprise, that's what I did, but they had the systems. Correct. And then when I got into pharma, I was working that way, but I was not getting the results I wanted, because just working, just going out, pounding the pavement, making calls. Right. But if you don't have a system or a process in place, and those are big words that people use, are very vague. And I'll get deeper into that in a second. But if you don't have a system in place where you can replicate that and you understand the arc and the journey of the client discussion and the sales process, and that really is it. When you think about processes, it could be anything from a conversation process to a sales process. You're taking somebody who could be unaware. And when we have 5 stages, and we talk about with Rhythm, with our technology, there's 5 pipelines, and also with surviving outside sales. It is unaware to aware, trial, user, and advocate. And the goal of every salesperson should take people to advocacy. And so you have to find out where's your customer in their process, in their journey. Have they used the product before? Okay, great. That's going to be a different series of questions you're going to ask.
Right. And
you're still having sales conversations, but I talk about the past, the present, and the future, and they're all states.
Right.
So you want to find out, each account, where have they been in the past? Where are they today? And where can I take them in the future? And you have to conceptualize this. And some people can't do this, and that's okay. I have difficulty in really short spaces being the closer. I need conversations. I need to draw things out.
Right.
My partner, he can close you in 30 seconds. Not in a slimy way. His name's Justin Lohman, one of the best salespeople I've ever met. And I've seen it. He's walked into doctors' offices and he's changed them on a dime in like 30 seconds to a minute.
Wow.
And I call him the sales ninja because he has figured out, he has boiled it down to the fewest amount of words, and he just hits questions that makes the other person stop in their tracks and then answers them and gets them thinking that it was their idea. And
That's
I'm
incredible.
just like, that was just, I literally come out starstruck and kind of all like, how did you do that? I could never replicate that. And so I'm aware. Like I have self-awareness that that's not me. I like to have conversations. I always said in pharmaceutical and medical, if I can sit you down for a $30 meeting, I'm going to get your business.
Right.
As long as it makes sense. I don't push things on people. And I've walked away because I'm thinking to myself, I can't sell you this. The product's just going to sit on the shelf. That's going to make my brand look bad. That's going to make me look bad. Correct. And you're going to be very frustrated. And I don't have the opportunity to sell you something in the future because I spent a lot of my career in dermatology and I never wanted to burn those bridges just by making a quick sale. And I've heard that reps have done that. And especially in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am in the territory, they've robbed Peter to pay Paul. And so, I kind of went off on a couple tangents. I don't.
No, well, there's a couple of things that I pulled out of there. One is the idea of just not selling people for the sake of selling people. I call that building a pipeline for life.
Yeah.
Like if you treat people right and you identify up front that it's not a good fit, that is going to come back around. I don't care. It may not be with that individual person. You may not sell them something, but they may say, hey man, this guy, Mike, is so trustworthy, because sales is a trust game. And if you do that with people and you say no to them because you're not a good fit for them, you can't help them, you've built inherent trust very quickly, and they may refer you to someone, they may have a different job, and they may see it, it is going to come back around, I guarantee. So I'm a full believer in that philosophy.
100%, if you do that, all of a sudden you become a solutions expert.
Absolutely.
You don't become a salesperson.
Exactly.
And then, you reserve the right to come back and see them when you have another solution for them.
Yep.
100% of the time I'd get a yes, because I would ask that question.
Right.
At the end of the meeting, you kind of, it's just right in your face. This product is not going to work in this office. Right. And I said, I really do appreciate your time. It looks as if this is not a great fit, but can I reserve the right to come back to you in the future if and when I have something that is going to fit your business model? Right. And if I've done discovery properly, I know exactly what type of products they're going to be. It's not going to be a mystery. I'm not going to walk in there each and every time. And I'd get a yes. 100% of the times I would get a yes, because people were thankful that I didn't try to push something down on them. And one of the reasons why we built the technology at Rhythm is also because there are a lot of prospects out there. And I think salespeople are spending their time with the wrong ones to make it look good on paper for their management.
Sure. I would agree with that.
And so, let's take Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, we go through discovery, and we realize that the product is not going to work for Dr. Smith or Dr. Smith's office. Okay. I say, I'd like to reserve the right. And let's say a year from then, I have a product, but I know it's not going to work for Dr. Smith because of the conversation that we had. I'm not going to immediately go see Dr. Smith. Why? That is a waste of my time. And time is one of the most valuable assets you have as a sales professional.
Yeah.
Everybody gets the same amount. It's how do you use it? How do you use it efficiently?
So that comes back into systems and process, right? How do you use time? How do you use it efficiently? And, for people like me, systems and process are somewhat scary words, but when they're broken down the right way and the value of those is brought to light, I think it frames it in a different way. So you talked about them being very conceptual words and being very big. So let's deep dive into a system that you use in your day to day, just to give people that framework, because I think it can sound big, but it actually can be very, micro little systems that fit into this overall thing. And I'm curious to get what you use.
Yeah. So one of the systems you can use, and there's lots of systems and processes. And if you're listening right now, I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, it's like Mike sitting behind a computer like a hacker in the movies. No, it's not like that.
Right.
Every day has a system. I'll give you an example. You wake up in the morning, you either shower, brush your teeth, you get up, you walk down, you put on fresh clothing, hopefully. You go downstairs, you drink coffee, you have breakfast.
Right.
That is a system, and that's a process. You don't think about it, but you already have these in your daily life.
It's
built in. You just don't realize that's exactly what they are. And sometimes it's a little tweak, as opposed to getting up earlier and, all the sales gurus are like, oh, get up early, get up at 5 and work out and do all that and have coffee and meditate. Well, you know what? I can tell you right now, Josh, that doesn't work for my body.
That's not going to work for you.
No, it's not going to work for me. So I tried that and it worked for like a week. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so energized. And then I crashed. Yeah, totally. I'm 6'4". Now, my playing weight was 225 and now I'm about 255, 260.
Yeah.
I've got kids, I'm in my 40s. And so,
drill.
That process and that system doesn't work for me. And so you got to kind of test it. But to go back to your question, so I was working with a client and one of the processes is just simply a process of follow through. Okay. So we had a plan and the plan needed to be altered dramatically. So I was like, okay, think about it as a football field. I love using the football field because everybody understands football in America and it is 100 yards. And so if you say, hey, let's get to the goal line, I just need to punch it in. Everybody understands it. It's kind of universal.
Rectangle field on a rectangle screen.
A rectangle field on a rectangle screen. It's a perfect television product, but I digress. So you think about going down the field, okay? And let's say you got to midfield and you're moving along and the offense is working and all of a sudden there's a flag for holding. It's going to move you back 10 yards.
Yep.
Do you just give up on the drive? No, you adjust. And so what you'll learn is the more you go through a certain system or a process or a protocol, like let's say you're with a prospect and all of a sudden they're like, hey, you know what? We had a death in the family. Let's push our meeting back 4 weeks. That's kind of like offensive holding.
Yeah.
Then what you have to do is you have to recalibrate.
Right.
Okay. A month has happened from the time we were scheduled to meet to the time we meet. Okay. So you're going to have to approach that call a lot different.
Completely different.
The steps you go through is just the process.
Right.
And so a lot of what people are doing, and Josh, I know you do, you have systems and processes.
I do.
Now that you're probably thinking,
I'm just being difficult for the sake of being difficult.
So going back to the example I was talking about. So client and I were talking and they were like, okay, this just isn't going to work. Let's recalibrate. And I said, okay, absolutely. Let's take a step back. And then when you take a step back, you have to kind of widen your gaze and envision, how is this going to look for, again, the process arc of getting from step A to completion.
Right.
And you take a step back and then it was, all right, instead of doing what we're going to do here, let's do this as our protocol.
Okay.
Client loved it. Okay, great. Yes. Oh my gosh, that makes it so much easier. Thank you so much. Okay, great. And then what I did was I got them to buy in on the process. Right. So it takes a little bit of work off of me because I put a lot of work into the first protocol. And then all of a sudden now I put it on one of their employees.
Yep.
And their employee was like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I can do that for you. Thank you so much. And so it's recalibrating and it's focusing on, again, that arc of every goal in sales is to get to completion, but not every journey of a client or a prospect is going to go on the same arc. And so you kind of this is through a system of trial and error. Mm-hmm. I mean, as we mentioned before, 20 years in the game, the first 10 years I was just trying to figure it out, falling on my face.
Right.
But I never gave up. And what I would also do is try to self-analyze. What could I do after that? And I did that in baseball, and a lot of great baseball players do that. And I had mentors in baseball that said, visualize every at bat before you get up there.
Yep.
It's kind of like, practicing your call, role playing before you get before you get in front of the person, and then afterwards, rehash the at bat. Yep. Did you take a pitch you shouldn't have? Did you swing? Did you swing at the right pitch? What could you have done differently? And sometimes it's nothing. You did everything perfect.
You did it right, yeah.
You're not thinking about your swing, because by the time you get up to bat, your swing should be second nature.
Exactly right.
And so, I one thing, Josh, you'll realize very quickly about me is when I get deep into the systems and process, it's like a beautiful mind. It's just all over the board. And so, luckily, my partners are great. I call them the mic wrangler.
Yeah.
Because they'll just lasso and reel me back in, and focus on, something specific. Because I'm, this podcast is not 4 hours long, but I could probably talk about systems and processes for 4 hours. So I don't know if the audience would want to listen to that.
I'll wrangle you in here for a second.
I
do appreciate that. So no, what I love about your example, right? And you're talking about process here, but honestly, what you just described to me was a human psychology lesson, which is my favorite part of sales, right? You're doing things with your prospect that helps them take ownership. You take it away, right? So that they can start to defend it. You're doing all these little things that are pushes and pulls, but you've built that into your process. You've built the human psychology into your process to get people on your side, to get them rowing with you, to get a plan in place that you guys can both mutually agree to. You're not just pushing, you're having a little bit of pull with them. And I love that, right? So if you're using things like human psychology as a part of your process to get people bought in, that's amazing. Like that's stuff I absolutely love.
Yeah. Oh, and on my podcast, we had Chris Beal on, the CEO of Connect and Sell.
Yeah, he's been on my show too.
Yeah, it is a fascinating guy. And he said everything in sales is really psychology. It is changing emotion.
So much.
And so I 100% agree. It is, the emotion is when they buy in and they trust you. And if they don't trust you, and we talk about, the goal of getting into sales is build advocates.
Right.
And so we have something, and I'm a big name giver. And so, with our podcast, it's getting in, dominating, and getting out. That's kind of the podcast. And so what we do when you start out is kind of like Sales Builders Academy. Right. You're building a house. You want to bulldoze the land and flatten it, or you just want to remodel. You just take it down to the studs. You should do that every time you take over territory, and every time you get a new product, you just tear it down to the studs. What do we have? Examine it, and then rebuild it. And build it back up, and a strong foundation. And then the dominating part, which Chris talks about a lot, his podcast is market domination or market dominating guys. And I love it. You have to dominate in sales or you're going to get left behind. And that really is the, hold on, let me get my cheat sheet. The sales advocacy method. I've got it on my whiteboard. The sales advocacy method is taking people and building them into advocates as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that in sales, the only way to dominate is to have at least one of two things. And that is total belief in product or service and total belief in you, the salesperson. So that is the relationship. That is the emotional bond that you have to get to as a sales professional. And if you don't, price is going to win out.
Yeah.
A competitor is going to win out. Ease of implementation is going to win out. If they are bonded to you, they're going to go through the war for you. They're going to allow you to be a little bit more expensive. They're going to allow you to take a little longer to implement because you're their friend, you're their buddy. They want to see you succeed as well as we want them to succeed. There's that mutual admiration, that mutual growth that they've just formed a partnership and they don't want to go anywhere else. No questions asked. I don't care. And Josh, I know you have these in your life where people are like, hey, let's go to this bar or restaurant. You're like, nope. If we're going Mexican, I'm going this place. Or I'm going, you're laughing, but you know it's right. Everybody has that. Totally. I have brands that I am loyal to, and you can't pry them out of me no matter what. I don't care if you say, hey, I'll give you an example. I do not wear Nike shoes because I have kind of a wide foot. I'm not a wide shoe guy, but Nikes are extremely narrow and they pinch my feet really bad and they're uncomfortable.
Right.
I wear Under Armour as far as my casual running shoe, training shoe. And I don't even question it. It is Under Armour. My wife laughs. She's like, do you get paid by Under Armour? I said, I should have. Because I've got shoe. I've got so many different Under Armour shoes.
I get it.
And there's no question. It's just a matter of which Under Armour shoe do I buy.
Totally.
They have created an advocate. And that's really what you should try to achieve as a salesperson.
Well, I'm the same with Nike shoes because I have a narrow foot. So
there you go. Okay. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you're touching on is something that I actually believe in a lot, which is, we talk about with products, product market fit. And we touched on this a little bit pre-show, but seller product fit or seller company fit, whatever it is, like I sell marketing to marketers. I'm good at that. I believe in it. I'm trusted in that space. I'm good at it, right? But if I had to go sell engineering to engineers, I couldn't do it, right? I don't have that kind of mindset. So I think as a seller, it is super important that you find a really good fit for you and your personality and the types of people that you're going to sell to, the types of product or service that you're going to sell, so that you can get that fundamental belief in the product or service, because that's going to help you have more belief in you. Those things are reciprocal, right? They feed off of one another. And if I don't think I would be successful as I am where I am if I didn't believe in the service that we bring to the market, and then therefore that brings more belief in myself. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. You need to understand what you can and can't do.
Correct.
From a standpoint of, as I mentioned before, I'm a tall, big guy.
Yeah.
People used to think I was like a tight end or a linebacker.
Right.
And I guess now, with the dad bod, I look more like an offensive lineman, but I'm a very, very large guy. So imagine a hallway calling on a doctor and I'm standing there in a suit.
Right.
I mean,
they see you.
Two of me cannot walk down the hall together.
Yeah.
And so I'm very physically intimidating, especially with these smaller, female doctors and PAs and nurse practitioners. And so I had to think about my body language. I had to think about my tone. I had to think about how I stood. I tried to kind of slump down a little bit and try to get as close to their level as possible. One of my biggest doctors was 4'11". I mean, not biggest, but one of my biggest prescribers, not biggest, but she was only 4'11".
Oh my gosh.
And so, I definitely did not want to tower over her and look down. It's very intimidating, no matter who you are.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if I have a big smile on my face, but knowing who you are and how people perceive you outwardly is extremely important. It's called self-awareness.
You talked about that earlier. I love self-awareness.
It's
underrated.
funny because when we talk about sales, everybody's focusing on closing, but nobody's focusing on the psychology of knowing themselves and how they appear to others when they're in a selling environment. Correct. And so I didn't start thinking about this stuff because if you're listening now, did not come natural. This was through thousands and thousands of calls and interactions with physician. And then all of a sudden kind of realizing and having people make comments or, different managers would say, I just kind of noticed that when you talk, you're just, as you can see, if you're looking at this video right now, hands are everywhere, very animated. Imagine that being a 6'4", 260-pound guy in front of you live in person. You'd kind of take a step back a little bit. And so I kind of realized in person, I kind of have to tone it down and not be as, excited, but I am very excited. I really believe in the products and services that I bring. And a second thing was I realized I was terrible at the 30-second call in the hallway. I was so terrible at it.
It's really hard.
It is.
Yeah.
If you're listening right now,
it's an interruption. It's tough.
If you're listening right now, one of my problems is I need to be more succinct. But I just get so excited talking about the things that I'm excited about. And
going.
You're throwing me softballs, Josh. And so what I realized was my success was going to be how quickly I could get that 30-second call to a meeting.
Right.
How could I translate that instead of trying to sell them in the hallway? How
Into
could I get that as
a
sit down or a dinner program?
Yeah. Totally.
And so when I made that switch in my process, again, that's a process.
Yeah.
When I walk in, my goal was not to sell them in the hallway unless they gave me a lot of time. But I know you probably ran into this, and every pharmaceutical rep runs into this, where they're walking down the hallway and they're like, all right, I don't have any time. What do you got?
Right. Exactly.
Then I switch from sell mode to the goal is to get a quiet environment where we can have a real conversation.
Yep. No, I think it's a great process. And it's funny, you mentioned that people focus in on the closing, and you mentioned 3 different things that you did in your career. You had pharma, post-care kits, and then capital equipment, right?
Yep.
Well, the pharma side, there really is no closing.
No. It's really marketing, because you can do a great job. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to leave the industry was, I would see how many prescriptions were being lost at the pharmacy.
Totally.
And it was just very frustrating because I realized that, okay, really quickly, I'm not in control.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I couldn't stand about the business is just you walk in the door, you interrupt this physician, you talk to him about what you're allowed to talk to him about because the FDA has
pharma guidelines.
They've created these white lines that you have to play within. So there's really no gray area, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you might get a fine, your company might get a fine, whatever it may be. And so let's say they see your disease state. They remember that you have a drug that you're talking about for that disease state. They believe in it enough to prescribe it to someone. That someone walks out of the office and brings the prescription with them. Mm-hmm. They decide they are going to fill that prescription. They bring it to the pharmacist. The pharmacist doesn't trade it out for a generic, and they report it. Like, there's 7 things that are going to happen between you and getting paid. Which drove me absolutely nuts.
I know. When I found out that most companies, because I worked for all small companies, I didn't work for big pharma, but a lot of the small companies, when I found out that they used companies that would use an amalgamation of data points.
Totally.
Like they would take wholesale units that would leave, and then they would take the prescription data, which was not 100% accurate, they would just guess. And I was like, my livelihood is based on people guessing.
Exactly right.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
hard pass. And the first position that I got out of pharma, that was not the first one I interviewed for.
Right.
And I used to run into a lot of the stigma of pharma's not selling.
Right, exactly.
So I don't believe you can sell. And I was like, all right, have me sell something.
Yeah.
And the interviewer would be like, what? Yeah, what's something you're really passionate about? I'll try to sell you.
Right.
Let's practice.
Let's play. Yeah.
Let's play. I tell you what, we're in a restaurant.
I love it.
Let me go try to sell the server. And sometimes they would say yes, and sometimes they would say no. But I tried for a while because I realized that while I loved the products and while I loved helping the patients in those, because I had products in rheumatology, I had products in pain management, vascular health, people are really struggling, and our products were great. They helped and they worked. But again, there was just so many headwinds, as I like to call it. And it's okay if I have headwinds because I can solve them.
Exactly right.
But when the headwinds are downstream and I have no control and say over it, that's what really frustrated me. And so I wanted to kind of go where, you know what, if the deal didn't close, it was because something that I could have controlled and I messed up, because I can learn from that and I can pivot very quickly. So that's why I really wanted to get into more of direct sales. But I tried for years. I mean, I probably went on 15 interviews and I got all of the same things. You have too much pharma in your background. Recruiters wouldn't even, because at that point I had almost a decade, and the recruiters wouldn't touch me. I'd apply for these jobs and it's, they didn't even care about the enterprise background. And, which is funny because if I had just been leaving enterprise, I probably would have gotten the interview and gotten the job.
Yeah, totally.
But they think that, pharmaceuticals isn't selling. And I said, it isn't, but you still can show
there
your
are components
value.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for those listening, this is a good example, right? Like you talked about going to companies that have good training and systems and process in place. No matter what industry, B2B SaaS, technology, if you're in a startup environment, those things don't exist. Oftentimes you're the one building those things. So I think taking some of the tips from Mike here and thinking about what are those little microsystems that build together and link together to create a process that you can follow, conversation in, conversation out, whether it's your day-to-day, finding new prospects, whatever it may be, it's going to be super important. And build that playbook, document it, and that's going to help you in your sales career, whether you decide to be an individual contributor all the way through, or you decide to go into leadership and management, because being able to create those things is a huge, huge win. Yeah. So Mike, what is the one thing that you want the audience to take away from this conversation today?
Well, I think take control of your sales career. I think a lot of times, I did in my early career, I was very passive. I thought that the companies were going to provide everything that was going to be needed.
Totally. And
that's not the case. And reach out for training, for mentorship, for, try to learn outside information with a reckless abandon, and read books, listen to podcasts, listen to this podcast, listen to every episode, go back. It doesn't matter if you just caught this, go back and start from the beginning. Stop listening to music. Okay. Stop scrolling on your phone in parking lots. If you have 5 minutes just throw on a podcast. You could pick one little phrase, one little thing out of that podcast that's going to drastically change your trajectory. And if you do that every single day, behind me is The Compound Effect. It's one of my favorite books. And basically, it's from Darren Hardy, and I'm showing the audience right now. It's one of my favorite books, and I try to look through it, look through my notes. Basically, the compound effect is if you make a change every single day, it's going to compound. It's kind of like the compound interest. And so sales is an evolution game. It's not an end game. And so keep working on your craft. That's one of the reasons why we built Rhythm AI, because we wanted to take all of the BS, with Rhythm. And I'm going to allow your audience. So we do have a $1 trial, but I'm going to extend the $1 trial for the first month for the first 4 months. Anybody listening right now, if you reach out to me directly, you can go to mike@rhythmai.com, RITHMAI.com. Tell me you listen to the podcast, and I'll get you $1 a month for the first 4 months. You can try our Rhythm Professional Plan. And what that'll do is it'll help you prospecting. It'll help you targeting. It'll help you routing. It'll help you kind of take the ideas that I vaguely talked about. And we built all the ideas into systems within our platform. Fantastic. And so your company may or may not have this for you yet. Don't wait. Take control of your training, because this is your life and this is your career. And being passive is not a winning formula. That's not how you dominate. Being aggressive and going after for what you want is how to dominate. So reach out to me, mike@rhythmai.com, if you have any questions and you want to take advantage of that. I'm happy to help anybody, or if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm always, for Josh's audience, I'm always willing to help.
Fantastic. And your podcast, you mentioned it. Where can we find the podcast?
So it's available. You can go to podcast.survivingoutsidesales.com or search Surviving Outside Sales Surviving Outside Sales. It's spelled how you think it would be. Surviving Outside Sales on any major platform. We're on all of them. My favorite is Spotify, but I'm not paid by Spotify, so you can go wherever you want.
Go wherever you want.
If you just want to go to the direct feed, it's podcast.survivingoutsidesales.com. And stay tuned, because I'm going to have Josh on. We're gonna run this back.
It's going to be great. We're going to run it back.
We're going to run it back in a couple weeks, because I have a lot of questions I want to ask Josh, and I'm going to hear more about his process, his systems, his experiences as well. So
Sounds
Josh,
good.
Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure and a treat.
You are welcome. Take control of your sales career. Reach out to Mike. Next time, everybody.